Hello and welcome. My name is Nancy Merritt, Vice Chancellor for Alumni Relations at the University of Pittsburgh. Thank you so much for joining us today for Pitt Perspectives on the Future of Work, Preparing Students for Career Success. The COVID-19 pandemic forced many of us to figure out how to work remotely. Last week, we hosted a panel that established how the workplace will be very different post-pandemic. The main question we are looking to tackle today is, how are we preparing Pitt students for this new future? On behalf of the Pitt Alumni Association, I would like to thank all of our panelists for shedding some light on this topic. Before I hand things over, I wanted to encourage our attendees to pose our panelists questions by using the Q&A functionality at the bottom of the screen. Click the Q&A button, a new window will pop up, and you can submit your question right there. We'll try to get to as many of your questions as possible today. With that, it is now my pleasure to introduce today's moderator. Anne E. Cudd is the University of Pittsburgh's Provost and Senior Vice Chancellor. Appointed in September 2018, she has primary responsibility for all aspects of the University of Pittsburgh's academic mission. Her duties include supporting scholarly excellence among more than 4,600 full-time faculty members and student success among the university's nearly 35,000 undergraduate, graduate, and professional students on all 5 Pitt campuses. Dr. Cudd previously served as Boston University's Dean of the College and Graduate School of Arts and Sciences, which is the institution's largest college. Prior to joining Boston University in 2015, she served for 25 years at the University of Kansas, where she earned the title of University Distinguished Professor of Philosophy. At the University of Kansas, Dr. Cudd held various positions of increasing responsibility, culminating in the position of Vice Provost and Dean of Undergraduate Studies, an inaugural role for that university. Dr. Cudd is an accomplished teacher and scholar whose research explores themes of oppression, economic inequality, capitalism, and gender. Her philosophical interests, the focus of more than 50 books, articles, and chapters published under her name, span social and political philosophy, philosophy of economics, decision theory, and feminist theory. She holds a doctorate in philosophy and 2 master's degrees, a Master of Arts in Philosophy and a Master of Arts in Economics, all earned from the University of Pittsburgh. Provost Cudd, thank you so much for being here today. Please feel free to take it away.
Thank you for that introduction, Nancy. I'm very pleased to be with you all today to engage this extremely important topic and with such a great panel of Pitt experts. You know, like no other year in recent memory, last year taught us the importance of adaptability and flexibility. It also reinforced the need for accessible and affordable paths for students seeking a degree. And even beyond that, we have a chance to develop opportunities for our students entering a workforce that is evolving with rapid changes in everything from climate to technology enhancements and global trade and competition. At the University of Pittsburgh, our response has been really quick and very strategic both. Even before the pandemic, Pitt was on the cutting edge of innovation to support our students, from personalized education initiatives to creative solutions to advance critically important efforts in access and affordability. For instance, at the undergraduate level, we launched the Pitt Success Pell Match program in 2019, which in a breathtakingly short period of time, virtually closed the retention gap for students who are eligible for the US Department of Education's Pell Grants program. So under this program, the university matches federal Pell Grants dollar for dollar up to the cost of attendance for qualified students across all 5 of Pitt's campuses. And the student retention rate for Pell eligible students rose from 86.9% to 93.4%, which essentially mirrors the rate for students who are not Pell eligible. When the pandemic hit, programs such as Pitt to Pitt were created to provide an immediate and really great path for our seniors to enter graduate and certificate programs efficiently and strategically. More than 60 graduate and professional programs from 12 schools are included in the Pitt to Pitt program. Graduating seniors and recent alumni from all Pitt campuses can apply for $2,500 or $5,000 scholarships, depending on the program. Pitt to Pitt programs are offered in data science, management, public health, engineering, health sciences, education, and other fields, really degrees that are in great demand in today's workforce. And well beyond that, we learn powerful lessons in our time of remote and hybrid learning environments. Those lessons are informing our path forward as we evaluate the ways to best serve students, undergraduates and graduates, both in the United States and around the world, all of whom had varying needs and expectations. Flexibility and top quality are key for us. We're also staying very attuned to the needs of employers seeking to hire our diverse and accomplished students. All that we do is dedicated to the success of our students at all levels, undergraduates, graduates, and postdocs. Now let's get to know our panelists a bit. I'll call on them one at a time to speak about their backgrounds and interests in today's discussion. So let me begin with Dr. Ariel Armani. Ariel?
Thank you, Anne. It's a great pleasure to be part of this great panel, this really interesting panel this afternoon. I'm Ariel Armani. I'm the Vice Provost for Global Affairs at Pitt. I'm the Director of the University Center for International Studies and a professor in the Graduate School of Public and International Affairs. My work on global education is absolutely related to the topic that we are going to be discussing today, the future of work. And let me tell you very briefly a couple of things about me. I'm born and raised in Buenos Aires, Argentina. My family is absolutely crazy about soccer. And when I'm not working, what I like to do is to find very adventurous trekking circuits and go there and dare myself to cross them, such what I did in Nepal a couple of years ago with the Annapurna Trail, where we went up to about 18,000 feet. So that's what I do for fun. It's a great pleasure to be with you today.
Thank you so much, Ariel. And now I'd like to call on Dr. Tinukwa Boulder. Tinukwa?
Thank you very much, Provost Cudd, and thank you again for inviting me to participate in this panel, and thank you to the attendees. So like Ariel, I am originally from England, and I'm also a fan of soccer, or football, shall I say. So I am the Director of Innovative Technologies and Online Learning at the School of Education at the university. I'm also a faculty member in the School of Education. Area of interest focuses on instructional technology, online course design, and also instructional design. So I work with the faculty to develop online programs at the School of Education. And thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, Tinukwa. And now I'd like to ask Dr. Julia Spears to introduce herself. Julia?
Hi there. Well, thank you so much. Like the other panelists, so excited to be here and talk about this important topic. I'm Julia Spears, the Associate Vice Provost for Academic Innovation, and I've had the great honor and pleasure to lead the Personalized Education Initiative, which we have since rebranded to the Forge Your Own Path project. So with many of the activities that you can imagine that have happened during the pandemic, we've had to really think about how our systems are talking with one another and supporting the path of the students. So how can we really make sure that our institution is nimble and kind of connecting the journeys and the pathways for students, and hopefully we'll get in some of the programs that we have worked so hard to share with the students.
Great, thank you, Julia. So as we begin our discussion, my first questions are for Tinukwa. From your perspective, what have we learned from a year of hybrid learning? And how do virtual and hybrid learning impact student success?
That's a great question. That's a heavy question right there, Provost Cudd. So yeah, we've learned a lot from hybrid learning. So as I think all the attendees and the panelists know that really quick and pivot we had to make to online learning and flexible hybrid learning due to the COVID-19 pandemic required us to learn a series of skills very quickly. So I can talk about it from my experience working with faculty. So one of the things we need to do was twofold. So obviously we need to cater to our students, but we also need to cater to our faculty as well. That involves offering some professional development opportunities to learn technologies that support online instruction and hybrid. So that's our learning management system, but also thinking about strategies for quality online instruction or hybrid instruction. So the University of Pitt provided a series of technologies to support that flexible teaching, right? So where faculty were using different modalities to reach students. And then in this process to engage with our students is finding ways to build in active learning opportunities, right? So using tools like Zoom and Teams, Canvas, all of those tools to kind of reach our students to ensure that continuity of instruction and learning. And so in thinking about this in terms of how do we prepare students for the future of work, those opportunities that, where we had to pivot, provided students with the opportunities to learn about specific skills. There's what we call 21st century skills. So how do we then engage in a virtual space? These are things that students can take with them as they transfer into the workplace, right? So now they know how to engage in teams, how to collaborate in teams, or other tools like Zoom. So those kind of things were kind of coincidental learning that occurred as we had to emerge. Other aspects were how do we engage and make sure that we're addressing social and emotional well-being, right? How do we attend to that? How do we provide opportunities to remain connected when we're so isolated? So we'll force as faculty and administrators to grapple with those and provide spaces virtually to connect with students and try and maintain those connections. So I'll stop there.
Okay, that's great. You've opened a bunch of topics that are really important to dig into. So I'm going to ask Julia next to talk a little bit about the investments we've made in technology to help students connect to academic support and or each other, and what impacts we've seen from those investments.
Mm-hmm. And to follow on with what Tinukwa was saying, I think one of the emerging challenges that happened at the beginning of the pandemic was the fact that many of our services are delivered in person, and student services, and for example tutoring, one of which was oftentimes or is oftentimes delivered in person situation. With the pandemic, we were really having to sort of focus on what do we do now and how do we better connect students so that they can have a shared learning experience with their tutor. So we really had to come together. We brought together a bunch of different college units who were providing tutoring, and we're really struggling with how to do that in a quality way. Working in partnership with Pitt IT. Over the summer, we had a small work group, and very quickly for fall semester, launched what we're calling Pitt Tutoring. And so we have this platform that was a shared resource that all of the units on campus can use, but it's also an easier platform for tutors and students to use in order to co-create and better understand some of the issues that they were coming. So I think in the last year, we've had some infrastructure support in the tutoring space, but we've also been able to really expand upon one of my favorite projects is Pitt Commons, and it's the online platform for faculty, staff, students, and alumni to connect and build community. Through the work of the last year, we have added a number of different components to that platform, one of which is our projects on Pitt Commons, and that's an opportunity for students to gain, what we saw was students who were graduating or who were looking to start their internships. Many times were said, we no longer can host you. So they were left with, a lot of time on their hands and a missed opportunity. And that's one of the things that we are trying very, very hard to eliminate, our missed opportunities. So through this Projects on Pitt Commons, which was a new sort of feature in Pitt Commons, we were able to source projects from alumni to host our students in a virtual fashion so they can learn some of those real world skills that we know that they need to cultivate as they transition from, after they graduate and transition into the workforce. And so we had some great opportunities for students to not sort of miss out and continue working in that space.
Well, great. Thank you, Julia. That's pretty interesting. And I would like to bring Ariel into this and ask him to talk a little bit about those kinds of skills. And I'd like you to talk about what you're learning from surveys of companies about shifting competencies for work. What is the university doing to shift its education to help develop these competencies in students? And just to take it a little bit further, how do you think this will impact our global students, those coming to Pitt with for their degree from around the world, and those looking to seek employment outside the U.S. after graduation? So that's a bunch of things put together, but I'll throw it to you now.
Thank you, and I'll touch on some of these. What we are seeing is that companies are responding very quickly and demanding a set of new skills, and they are focused on the following. Companies are valuing more and more emotional skills, interpersonal skills, and advanced cognitive skills. So the world of having very, very precise technical skills that allow you to be prepared for a single type of job is no longer the future, and is no longer the present. That is, what we are seeing is that the value is placed on thinking about a world, an occupational world, where jobs are going to evolve constantly. Some of the jobs, and many of the jobs, in fact, are going to disappear over time. So what we are seeing from employers is an emphasis on workers who have a set of skills that allow them for flexibility, for leadership, for teamwork, and very important, for multicultural competence. What employers want are people who can work across diversity, across cultures, who can interact, understand value differences, and work together to aggregate all these various perspectives. This is really a global phenomenon. We are seeing this all over, and it is, of course, absolutely critical in the United States, where the emphasis on innovation and creativity, as we know, is absolutely central. One additional thing, and then we will have the opportunity to talk about some specific things that we are doing at Pitt, is that all this means that we need to advance something new, which is a constant learning mindset. How do we teach skills that are taught in one context and allow students to be able to transfer those skills to other contexts? This is absolutely central in terms of how we are getting ready for the future of work.
Yeah, I agree. This is a really important thing that we are talking about a lot in higher ed these days, is these sort of domain general skills, if you will, that cut across lots of areas. And certainly the competencies that you mentioned are all really important aspects of those skills. Tinukwa, I want to come back to a point that you made in your initial answer, and that is about the social and emotional issues. What did we see in terms of that with as a result of virtual learning this past year? And what did you or your team and the university do to try to address those concerns?
That's a great question. Thank you. So yeah, no, we did some very interesting things. I say we, meaning obviously collectively, not me personally. Some of the things, some key examples were, Julia, you mentioned some of these already picked comments, but on a smaller scale within the School of Education, we offered this opportunity for coffee chats, which provided a space virtually for everyone within the School of Education community to meet and discuss and connect. One thing we were finding from surveys with the students was that sense of isolation, not being able to meet and chat with colleagues. Other things that we saw that kind of emerged from this was building opportunities for meditation within classrooms, virtual classrooms. So faculty will often go through with students who are willing to go through a very quick meditative practice. Other aspects were building time within classrooms for students to connect with their peers informally before engaging in the formal practice of learning. So those things were really helpful. And then we had, speaking to some of the things that Ariel talked about, the School of Education launched this Pitt Ed Justice Collective, which provided opportunities for that, what you call multicultural competencies, but focusing on equity and anti-racism. So this provided, this particular approach involved students, faculty and staff within Pitt, the university, and also beyond as well. And that provided opportunities to learn with each other and be in the community with each other. So this involved webinars, study groups, book studies, a variety of opportunities for students to learn with faculty. And then that provided opportunity for connection and conversation too. And so what I see in terms of lesson learned, Provost Cudd, is this idea that something that we should have been doing all along, but there was a intentional focus on that social emotional well-being, intentional focus on how do we adapt our teaching within this emerging need. Right now we've seen this, and so there were teachers and faculty rather thinking about these things as well as students. So not only are we engaging in addressing this, but we're also modeling this for our students as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you could say that well-being and mindfulness are more of the competencies that really the workforce is really looking for now. And of course, we want our students to lead happy, productive lives. And so I think these are some great new lessons that we've learned. And I think you're right that we really should have been doing this all along, but it's one of those silver linings of the pandemic, perhaps. Julia, I'd like to turn once more to you to ask you to look at this through the lens of the forge your own path or personalized education. How has the rapid change in work life impacted personalized education, or how we look at forging your own path? Has the new normal made this more or less relevant for students? What are your thoughts about that?
I think it has made it central that we need to figure out how to adapt to some of the needs that our students bring with them when they come to the University of Pittsburgh. And I think now more than ever, we have to create some flexible systems, and we have to create systems that talk to each other and follow the student. So, sort of placing the student at the core and everything around, so that we have a better, deeper, more robust understanding of how that student is experiencing all the rich opportunities and curricular and co-curricular journeys that they're on when they come here. So, for us, the Forge Your Own Path initiative was founded on this premise that we want to do a better job of connecting people with the tools and the information they need, and that we create infrastructure for that to happen. So how do we ensure that students know what they need, have the tool to do it, have the information to do it, make informed decisions, so they're learning that discernment while they're here in a safe space, and that we make it easy for that to happen. While it's easy, it's not easy because, we're a big place and we have a lot going on, and there's many different opportunities, but that's part of what the role of the Forge Your Own Path initiative is seeking to do. We have a couple of different priorities that we work on. Mentoring and advising is at the core of that. So really trying to bring together some resources for our mentors and advisors on campus and sharing out those best practices. We have a whole suite of programs, workshops, training modules, and really often, sort of like what Tinukwa was saying, people are hungry to connect with one another, creating a space for those really, really rich conversations so they can learn from one another. I mean, oftentimes there's just amazing work that's happening and they're just not connected together to learn how to apply a best practice in one school into the context of another. So creating that space and that sense of community among our advisors and our mentors has been a critical part of the Forge Your Own Path initiative. In addition, we've spent a lot of time on thinking about technology. So really excited to announce that we are launching our catalog of opportunities, which brings together some of our co-curricular components that happen. And Ariel and his team were one of the first to think about how the catalog and really the catalog of opportunities is meant to be a collection. It's a repository of all the different events and high impact practices that exist on our campus, but in one place, so it's easier for students, faculty and staff to find and to search according to their own interests. So again, it's around personalizing it for their own interests, and they can hopefully not miss out on those opportunities. Related to that, and actually our global distinction was the launch of something that we're very proud of, which is our interdisciplinary transcript distinctions. And we have 3 that we have launched so far, with another one in the works. And essentially this distinction is an opportunity for students to think above just their curriculum that they're in or their major. It's a combination of curricular, co-curricular, and experiential learning activities that bring to life a theme. So the global distinction was the lead. They kicked it off, and it's been very successful. We have an honors distinction, a sustainability distinction, and we're working right now on a civic learning distinction. So, sort of cutting across the curriculum on the skills and the passions that students have around some of these really important topics. And I think that translates in the workforce, because, they need to think about, like Ariel said, how are you going to translate something that's happening in this context? And it's related, it's different, but it's related. So how do you apply that learning? And I think the more we can construct opportunities for students to do that, again, in a safe space and an encouraging but challenging. I mean, these are not easy programs. They take time and energy and dedication. And I think our students are rising to the challenge.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, and the transcript distinctions also really allow the students to clearly communicate to potential employers what they've done in greater detail than before. So that's great. So we have some great questions from the audience, some of which came in as you registered. And so I want to turn to some of these now. And I first want to start kind of building off what Julia was talking about with the global affairs distinction by asking Ariel the following question that came from the audience. And that is, how have you in global affairs used technology to complement or scaffold students' global learning experience? After all, the study abroad was perhaps the most disrupted aspect of our education. And so you've had to rethink so many things. And I think our audience would be really interested to hear how you're thinking about global studies, study abroad, using technology to scaffold and complement global learning.
That's a great question. It's such an important issue. In fact, what we have done is to move really away from the traditional concept of study abroad into what now we call global experiences. And this is an approach that is no longer the binary world of you can travel and then you go to another country, or if not, everything essentially is canceled. What we are doing is integrating technology into these flexible models. So now we have the opportunities for, and I will tell you in a second, for experiences that are virtual, that are hybrid, and that are on location. So it's a very fluid situation. And this has a number of very important advantages. On the one hand, that will allow us to accommodate and adapt very quickly to changing situations. That is, if it's not possible, we have no mobility or restricted mobility in order for, to go to other countries, we can clearly immediately offer virtual opportunities for different programs and different approaches to the programs that students were supposed to engage in. Another thing is that we have already started to develop new models of virtual engagement using technology. For example, we are working now in multinational teams where students join students from other countries on consulting projects for companies in a particular country. One example, for example, is a project that is being done with a healthcare provider in Brazil that involves students from Brazil, Colombia, Peru, and Pitt students. And they are working on a new project for the company, looking at risk assessment, strategy, planning, a series of elements that allow this group to work together on this project. And as you were mentioning, and now this is not just about the usual traditional way of assessing their performance. Now the assessment is through the delivery, through the way in which they communicate the results, what they learn from the experience. And so what we are seeing is that there are tremendous opportunities in the use of technology to bring together these global perspectives and advance in global experiential learning.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I'm getting several questions from the audience that really want to probe those kinds of things that we've learned or gained, those practices that we now have, or the experiences or the new programs that we now have as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. And I think that the global learning that you're designing and the global internships that are that can be virtual or have been a great example of that. So what I want to do now is ask each of you to respond from your perspectives about things you think we will carry over from the COVID-19 pandemic into, and I know you've already spoken a little bit about, but other examples of things that you think we've learned that we will carry over into the future and make a Pitt education even stronger and set our students up for the changing global workforce that they are heading towards. So I think I'm going to begin with Tinukwa because she's on my left. So Tinukwa, if you could start with that question.
Thank you very much. So some of the things that was implemented, obviously, due to the pandemic was this notion of flexible learning, or what we call the Flex at Pitt. And so this was faculty teaching using a variety of modalities where you teach in person and students have the opportunity to access the content via Zoom, and then folks can kind of learn asynchronously. I can see there being a space for that to stay and adapting that and providing some flexibility. So it seems to me the theme from what Ariel and Julia are talking about is this notion of flexibility. So we're talking about students and future employees having this flexible approach to work. And so we're doing the same thing on the other end, right? Providing a flexible approach to teaching and learning that reaches students, worldwide. So that I can see that being, I see that being fine-tuned and seeing where that works best for programs and being intentional about how we adopt that new way of learning. Some of the things in my area is acknowledging that there's a need for digital literacy. So we're building around courses and programs that really support and bolster students' knowledge and faculty's knowledge of how to use various technology tools. So looking at how we can integrate that into a School of Education program so that our teachers, typically teacher education candidates who are typically used to teaching in a brick and mortar can now adapt quickly to online learning. What does that look like for teacher education? What does that look like in the K through 12 environment? And so providing our students with knowledge and exposure to those various tools so they're equipped to kind of transition as well, that flexibility, right, as well. And so those are the kind of the key things where I see that, one, we can leverage technology to support this, but also other aspects that we want to consider as well is this notion of the digital divide. And I think, Provost Cudd, you can speak more about this in terms of what university is doing to address that. And that's something that was really exacerbated by COVID, and that is for providing opportunities and providing access not just to the content and teaching, but access to hardware as well, like things like hotspots and providing access, internet access, high-speed internet access. So addressing those kind of things and continue thinking about how do we increase access, but then access in multiple forms. So access to tools, or access to how to use those tools effectively to teach and learn. And so those are the things that we're kind of focusing on as we move forward, kind of thinking post-COVID.
Yeah, that's terrific. Yeah, in that regard, I know that our IT department has provided for a number of neighboring communities really high-speed internet access so that the children in those neighborhoods could actually do their schoolwork during this time. And as you point out, we also have provided, hardware, technology, hotspots, laptops, and also, I believe the School of Education it has been working with Microsoft, a Microsoft suite of products to help teachers learn how to use those things and to learn with their students. Can you say a little bit more about that?
Yes, thank you for the reminder there. So yes, I serve on a working group with Pitt IT, Microsoft educators, and the School of Education. And so what we've been doing is some outreach work where I've been actively connecting with superintendents at schools in the Pittsburgh area to find out what their teachers' challenges are with teaching in using a particular tool, Teams and Microsoft products. And so from that finding and exploration, we were able to develop a 6 weeks Microsoft Innovative Educator program. This was in the fall. And so we offered that to teachers, but also invited our students, Pitt students, to attend as well. Then in this spring term, we also offered a series of workshops that catered to assessment strategies using Teams, and also focus on how do we engage students, and that was just really successful. And then we focused as well on school leaders. How do they leverage Teams to connect with their administrators, but also families and teachers and their students as well. So we offered a range of things, and we hope to see that continue. So that's something that was really helpful and provide us opportunity to be intentional about the types of workshops that we offer to support not just our students, but also the community that supports the university.
Mm-hmm. Great, thanks for speaking to that. I think it really emphasizes the importance for our students today of really being able to grapple with both virtual and face-to-face environments, and how they can, and we're teaching them, how they can use tools to do that. At the same time, we're certainly learning about how to do that ourselves. So now let me ask Ariel, who's the next one on my screen anyway, to speak a little bit to this thing, a little bit more, because you've already spoken somewhat to what you think we will carry over into the after times, if you will, from what we've learned in the COVID-19 pandemic.
I'd like to focus very briefly on three things. First, this experience reinforces our emphasis on advancing new models of education. So we are approaching students, the educational experience, as working with students as independent learners, and where the teachers are facilitators, are most of the time mentor, coaches, resources. So this is a new model. It's a model where the pedagogical approach is about empowering students and really establishing new habits of learning. So this is one very important thing that reinforces something that we were thinking about before, but now clearly has to be a major effort on our part in the work we work with students. Second is that we have seen the realization of something that we always wanted to create and then suddenly happened, which is to start seeing the phenomenon of what we call global classrooms, and having discussions that involve students from all around the world and that invite major players in various aspects. For example, do we want to talk about the European Green Deal? Well, we were able to bring the politician who leads this effort to talk to our students and students around the world about what Europe is doing in terms of reaching its environmental goals for 2050. So that kind of approach is something fantastic and incredibly rich. And finally, one very important thing is to think very seriously about inequalities, that global inequalities are, of course, major, very important. And when we focus on technology, of course, among many other things, we need to take into account those inequalities. You mentioned that before, and that there are, of course, inequalities in the United States in terms of access. Well, this is a global phenomenon, and we shouldn't assume that everybody has the same kind of access, the same technology. So this poses new challenges for our students and our faculty. What are the kinds of innovations that we can think about so that we can integrate larger populations into these global conversations?
Great, thank you. So Julia, I'll pass it to you, but I want to also add a little twist to it, because there is one of our audience members is asking about the needs of undergrad versus grad students during the hybrid and future in-person experiences, or environments. So do you think, what do you think are the things that will carry over, and does that vary by graduate versus undergraduate, and do you have some ideas about how specifically it might change the graduate experience?
I think it does. The short answer is yes. I think it varies a little bit, because as you continue on in your education, conceivably, you're a little more autonomous in what you're learning. You're becoming an expert in that particular field, and you're more, in control of the learning. So as an undergrad, you're still, for many of our students, they come to us open to explore and to really think about what that path is. That's why the Forge Your Own Path is so important, because we have to help them navigate the varying roadblocks and opportunities. I think that some things that I think that are going to carry over that were done well, and I think across campus, the access to advisors. So one of the things on access, sort of a different take on it, is that I think during the pandemic, we had more access to people that you normally wouldn't have. We were all in this isolated space, and people who might not have as much time, think of all the different events that you were on and some famous person was there, because you're like, how did they get that person? Like just access to people who have a unique lived experience that could really inform whatever the learning goals are of a particular situation. I think that we saw a lot more of that, and we're forced to take advantage of the technologies, the Zoom classrooms and these webinars, in order to ensure that we could give voice to some people and really provide access to students to people that they might not have ever had access to before. So there was a positive in some of that. I think we're going to continue to see that moving forward as a positive, that these people and these guests and these, deep thinkers in fields that we're wanting to expose our students, being more flexible in the way in which we can have conversations with people, I think moving forward will continue. I also think advising really did a nice job of transitioning online, and advisors connecting with their students through Zoom calls and Teams calls and all kinds of calls, but just that access to people who were critical as they're making these decisions, and we're all trying to figure it out. I think we're going to see, many times advising happened in person. I think this is one of those cases where we will see a hybrid of some in person, but continuing on with the access to, give the student the opportunity to do a Zoom meeting, advising meeting versus not. I think that will certainly continue in a lot of spaces. And I also think, just going back to Pitt Commons, we saw a lot more connection online and people reaching out within the community, the Pitt community on Pitt Commons, doing flash mentoring and asking for advice, and being aware of just the network and just the community that we have to take advantage of the experiences that our alumni have, and all of the different disciplines and industries that they are a part of, that they are leaders in, and how do we sort of harness some of those lessons learned and the skills and that they have can share with our students. So, sort of bridging that gap. I think we're going to see a little bit more in terms of the mentoring and just being more flexible about how that is. You don't have to meet for coffee. There's other ways for you to connect and build community, but it has to be deliberate. And I think we're still learning about what the best way is to, create leadership opportunities and build a sense of belonging and community in a virtual space. It's, you have to be intentional. And I think we're all sort of continuing to refine and think and assess what we're doing well and what we need improvement on. So it's an exciting time.
Mm-hmm. Ariel, did you want to also chime in on this?
What I wanted to say is that looking at the questions that have been posed, there is a very important, very interesting question that makes me to emphasize a very important point, is that when it comes to international education, we need to be very clear that what we are talking about is about adding, not replacing. That is, the experience of going to another country, being in a different culture, speaking another language, interacting with people who have different habits, different customs, that cannot be replaced by the virtual experience. What we are doing is adding opportunities, adding new dimensions, and being more flexible. So I felt that this was a very, very important point to make, because it's very important that we don't just stick with the fact that technology could be, that element that replaces other experiences. We need to use it in a very smart way, in an intelligent way, to increase the quality and the effectiveness of the education that we provide.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. One of the other questions from the audience that is really good is asking about how we teach, especially during a pandemic. But I would also say, and how are we going to change the way we teach going forward? Things like leadership, team building skills, creativity, and this constant learning mindset. I think we have learned things about that, but I'd invite any of you to weigh in on specifically how to teach, those workforce critical skills in this world in which so much of our work has to be done in teams, and we each need to exercise a certain amount of leadership and constantly be learning ourselves.
Yeah, no, I can jump on there. That's valid, and I absolutely agree with what you all have said. In terms of a couple of things I wanted to address as well, is that distinction between undergraduate and graduate students. Yes, there are definitely differences there, but I think what lessons learned in that regard is providing the supports, right? Is that online support. So what kind of virtual space can we build for students so they can learn the tools that they need to be able to engage in this way? So part of that Pitt Microsoft initiative, the School of Business really did a fantastic job of creating that virtual kind of real world connection with business on a project. And what we found from that experience was that focusing on communication, because when you're in the virtual world, you have to have that clear communication, right? So that written skills, that verbal skills in both mediums. And so I think that's one of the ways that we can use to build community is to engage with students and kind of help create spaces that enable them to collaborate. And so one of the examples will be using Teams to do that, and also building those specific skills and milestones that students need to achieve. And those kind of things can help build community, but also help build those skills that they need to be able to engage with employees and engage with their peers in that learning environment. So I think for me, the lesson learned here is what kind of supports can we build in, that really helps students, that notion of scaffolding, that learning process, right? And so that's what faculty are doing in that virtual space, is to scaffold that learning experiences that help not only to build community, but also build those communication skills that they need to maintain those connections.
Mm-hmm. Great.
I wanted to add that we will be emphasizing more and more our focus on building leadership skills. I was thinking one of our most successful programs that we started for a couple of years before the pandemic is a program focused on leadership, where students spend the semester learning about leadership theory, styles, and then they go to India and have an experiential learning opportunity to go on a 2-week trek in the Himalayas, where they experience and they put in practice what they have learned about leadership. But this is a practice, this is experiential. It's a program that it's always full, and now we will have to see how we accommodate what I imagine will be many, many more students wanting to have that experience. Because what we have seen as a result of these very difficult times is that for leaders, the range of decisions has broadened, that leaders have to make decisions not knowing many, many things. That is the acceptance of ignorance and lack of information. Something that we knew about is now at the forefront of what a leader has to face. And there are lots of contradictions or seeming contradictions that need to be brought together now. So this is one of the areas where I can predict, and I think I will be pretty certain about that, that will be a major focus of what we will do at Pitt.
Great, thank you. And Julia, would you like to?
Well, I'll add to that. I completely agree. I think leadership is sort of at the core of many of the things that students who leave the University of Pittsburgh, we want them to be leaders in their field. I also think that there's ways for us to cultivate leadership in the everyday, and I mean that in that for some students, they do all these amazing things and sometimes can't translate the amazingness of it into the skills and the competencies and the work that they will, that experience will help them have a better context, out in the world. So I think as we're working with our students and providing them with the technologies and the people and the information and the experiences, helping them to translate that in the why are we doing this? What are you learning? And again, going back to those rich opportunities for communication with their peers, with a near peer group, with mentors, to really deeply understand, what they're learning in the here and now and how that translates in the future. I think that's critical. And I think we have to continue with those conversations at the core of many, again, like I started, students need to be at the core of all that we do. And how do we continue to situate them in the middle and surround them with amazing resources from all of the alumni that are on the call, to the faculty and staff and other students that are around them, and just all the opportunities that exist here at the university. And I think translating that and the leadership lessons learned, they're there. Sometimes we just have to unpack it a little bit.
All right, so we just have like 2 minutes left. And so I'm going to throw out a question from myself. If you had one thing, if you could say one thing that you learned that has changed the way you work or how you lead your teams or work with your teams that you're going to take forward, I wonder, if you could share that with us. So to the audience, I'm springing this on them. I didn't give them a chance to think about it ahead of time. but I'm going to just throw it out there to our experts to say, how have you continued to learn, and what one thing would you say you take away? So Julia, I'm going to start with you this time and then go the other direction.
You know, it's a little thing, but one sort of business practice that we've done is a very short morning meeting with the entire team, very short, to, you know, situate the day, prioritize. But because we're not all in the office, we can't have, like, you pass by someone says, oh, I saw this, or, you know, and it's those little short bursts of communication without burdening teams and email. So that one short team meeting in the morning has been very helpful to connecting the work and making sure that we continue to work as a team as we're pushing our initiatives forward. So I see that not going away anytime soon.
Great, thank you. And Ariel, what would you throw out there?
For me, it has been the fact that the leading with humanity is absolutely crucial, and that's something that for me has been a tremendous learning experience from the moment in which we made the decision to bring back the hundreds of students and faculty who were all around the world and bring them back to the US in a safe way, and in a way that it was safe for their communities, all the way to reinventing a lot of what we do and working with our great team. It's about humanity.
Thank you. Yeah, and Tinukwa?
Thank you. So I would say for me, it's just supporting faculty with grace, you know, being able to be mindful of faculty needs and the needs of students as well as we go through this challenging process of the pandemic. And for me, you know, I started at Pitt a month before the pandemic, so I had to throw myself out there in committees and university initiatives to kind of get to know people. So, you know, don't be afraid to just go out there and meet your colleagues in a virtual space and still be able to build those connections. So, yeah.
Great. Well, I want to thank you all, and I want to hand this back to Nancy Merritt.
Thank you so much. Thank you for moderating, Provost Cudd. Thank you to all of our panelists for your wonderful insights and for sharing your expertise. And of course, thank you to all of our audience members for joining us today. As you're hopefully aware, today's panel is part of a series hosted by the Pitt Alumni Association called Pitt Perspectives. Through this program, we take themes developed from global challenges or other lofty questions, and we highlight Pitt's response to them. I encourage you all to go to the Pitt Perspectives webpage to see some of the other content we've already developed. And that link is in the chat right now. I also encourage you to let us know about your experience today by filling out the survey that will pop up on your screen at the conclusion of this webinar. And also in that survey, you have a chance to tell us you know, any ideas, anything, suggestions you have for future themes or topics. So with that, I just want to thank you all again for joining us today and say hail to Pitt.
Hail to Pitt.